I am super excited to show you guys the game's first piece of environment art. It is absolutely sick. But first, a couple of other new additions to the game. Last week I showed you all of the new enemy types, but there was one type that I wasn't quite happy with, the one I called the Earthbending Archer. First of all, this is an avatar, there wasn't supposed to be any kind of magical type of stuff in my game, and second, it was too boring gameplay-wise, because it was basically the exact same thing as the regular archer enemy, except that they throw blocks at you in between shooting their arrows, which is also redundant because every enemy in the game is already capable of kicking nearby objects at you. So I came up with this new guy instead, the ultimate evolution of the ranged enemy. I call him the Dashing Multi-Shot Archer. He dashes around like the Dashing Gunman, and fires 3 arrows at a time instead of just the one that the regular archers fire. This makes it so that unlike with the other ranged enemies, it's almost impossible to dodge their projectiles by running around. You're forced to keep an eye on them and break through their arrows whenever they shoot at you. Also, I think it looks cool. The other new addition this week was a couple of environmental hazards. I've previously shown the floor spikes, and now I also added some explosive barrels and some dangerous moving platforms. I'm probably only going to use these sparingly for specific fights because the basic fighting is by far the most fun part of the game, and I want that to be the focus 90% of the time. And finally, just before I reveal the environment art, quick story about one of my first playtests. I had a friend of mine play the game earlier this week, and I mainly wanted to see where the difficulty was at because I had done some balancing. Now, I believe John Romero of Doom once said that when you're designing a level and you're able to beat it with your eyes closed, that should be your hard mode. So I put that theory to the test, and I'm happy to announce that it took my friend approximately 3 hours to beat the first level of the game. Ben, you're gonna have to get good, bud. So it's probably a little too hard right now. I'm gonna scale that back a little bit, but that should be reassuring for those of you who have commented concerns about the game not being hard enough. I promise you it is very hard. I just make it look easy because I play the game 100 times a day. And now, the moment we have all been waiting for. The first official reveal of the first piece of environment art for the game. Welcome to the abandoned dojo that has been repurposed as a hideout by one of the game's main characters. This is the opening tutorial level of the game where you'll learn how to dash, attack, kick objects, throw projectiles, and so on. Quite an improvement from what I had before, as you can see. There's still some work to be done to touch it up some more and get closer to that old anime look with some post-processing effects and whatnot, but we've got some cool lighting effects in there and it's already looking pretty damn good. Next week I'll be doing an overview of the game's narrative to make sure any special narrative moments in the game have been set up properly in preparation for the art we'll need for that, and hopefully I'll get into designing the game's second boss fight. And as for the artwork, we'll be moving on to the first sprites for the enemies, and then that will lead into the part of the art that I am currently most excited for, the blood and the gore. I'm really hoping to come up with our own dynamic system that can splatter blood across the floor and the walls, maybe have a few severed limbs here and there, and as much variety as possible for all the bodies you're going to be dropping as you move throughout the game. So go ahead and like and subscribe if you want regular updates on the game, because now it is time for me to reveal to you the top 10 greatest games ever made. Technically, this is a list of my top 10 personal favorite games of which I have fond memories, but because my taste is exquisite and impeccable, it is in practice essentially an objectively correct list of the greatest games ever made. Number 10. Call of Duty 1 and Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. I remember being a kid, sneakily staying up late. It's midnight, I got the headphones on, volume's up full blast, and I am in the middle of fucking Stalingrad going "Ah!" as I charge up the hill with a clip of ammo and no gun, hoping to remove the Nazi scum from my motherland. The single-player campaigns of both of these games were incredibly immersive classics. How can anyone forget the COD 4 opening cutscene, "They prostituted us to the West"? And of course, COD 4's multiplayer was revolutionary, though it's too bad that the game's progression system was then copied by everyone else in the industry and went on to permanently ruin the future of online multiplayer gaming. Wait, what did I just say? Number 9. Fable. Probably going to be a couple surprises on this list. I'm sure this is one of them. Back in the day, I followed this game's development when it wasn't even called Fable yet. It was Project Ego. I remember Peter Molyneux, whatever, however you pronounce his name, promising all kinds of crazy shit like planting an acorn in the game and being able to visit the tree that would grow from it years later. Despite it being insanely overhyped, I still loved it and thought it was a great game. Number 8. Rome Total War and Shogun 2 Total War. These games are absolute spectacles. So far as I know, still to this day, the only games that truly recreate that feeling of playing out an epic, ancient battle scene from a film. Sometimes the citizens of cities I had conquered in these games would rebel and kick me out, and I thoroughly enjoyed reconquering those cities and then crucifying everyone for resisting my rule. Number 7. Mass Effect. My all-time favorite RPG series. I'm a fan of sci-fi, and I normally don't care much for lore or world building or any of that kind of stuff, but this is probably the only game in which I read every available text in-game. I love the idea of alternate histories of humanity that predict the future, and my all-time favorite show is Star Trek TNG, and this is probably the closest thing to a game that made me feel like I was living in that kind of world. Number 6. The original first release of World of Warcraft. The first MMO I ever bought was EverQuest. Saw it at a store when I was a kid, brought it home, and was thoroughly disappointed when I discovered that I needed a credit card to play it. But upon graduating from 8th grade, I got World of Warcraft with a prepaid playtime card, and it blew my fucking mind. More importantly, I think it was very much a product of its time. Online multiplayer gaming nowadays is just so different from what it used to be like. Nobody knew what they were doing, people were a lot less try-hard. So you'd have these moments where you'd be running a dungeon for like 5 hours, next thing you know it's 4 in the morning, you guys have wiped 50 times, and you're all still having a great time. It was really that social experience that, for me, made it such a standout experience. I did play the classic re-release that they did not too long ago, and it was fun, but not quite the same. Everyone already knew everything about the game, and people would get mad and leave a party if anyone even so much as pushed a wrong button once. It just didn't have that same sense of innocence and exploration. Number 5. Ninja Gaiden. My all-time favorite character action game, and another one of the few games that I followed carefully during its development. I remember when I got my copy of official Xbox magazine that always came with a demo disc, and it had the first Ninja Gaiden demo on it. I was so pumped for that shit, and it was so awesome. I also remember I was so obsessed with this game that my friends at school made fun of me by constantly calling it Ninja Gaiden. Shout out to designer Tomonobu Itagaki for going on to create Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball. Number 4. Counter-Strike Source and Half-Life 2. I remember the first time I played the CS Source beta, and I walked into the tunnels of D-Dust 2, and the lighting effects and the drifting particles just blew my fucking mind. I think the Source engine in general was such a defining thing about that whole era of PC gaming, with Gary's mod and TF2 and everything else, and it was the first and probably only time I was part of a clan and participated in some of the earlier forms of competitive gaming in the Cow League. Not that I ever got very far, but it was a fun social experience. Number 3. StarCraft and Warcraft 3. These were my OG RTS experiences. I was never very good at RTS games, but I nonetheless loved these, and by far my favorite part of them were all the custom maps that people made for them. Zergling Rush, Footman Wars, Angel Arena, Lord of the Rings ripoffs, Lurker and Bunker and Cannon Defense. There was always something new and different to play, and it was so much fun. And of course, the best maps were the ones where people would set up buildings so that it would draw nude hot chicks on the minimap. Number 2. Unreal Tournament. My all-time favorite FPS game series. I've always loved Capture the Flag, and I've always loved high speed and high intensity in my FPS games, and Unreal Tournament perfected these. And much like StarCraft and Warcraft 3, it had a billion custom maps and game modes that people came up with for them. Instagib CTF on the Facing Worlds map will always be one of my favorite experiences, and I was very sad that Epic gave up on the newest Unreal Tournament game because it was shaping up to be a very good modern throwback to the original Unreal Tournament. And finally, number 1. Super Mario 64. What is there to even say about this? It is the perfect game. And I'm going to throw in some quick honorable mentions here because so many great games started popping back into my head as I was trying to put together this list. Mech Assault, Star Wars Jedi Knight Jedi Academy, Ocarina of Time, Black and White, Kung Fu Chaos, Halo, the old PUBG, FIFA and NHL 12, Wayne Gretzky's 3D Hockey, Hotline Miami, the first 3 original Resident Evil games, Dino Crisis, Dragon Age Origins, GTA 1 and 5, Battlefield 1942, Splinter Cell, Pokemon Red, Yellow, Blue and Stadium, and many more that I'm sure I'm forgetting. Well, that's it for this week. Thank you guys so much for watching. My apologies for my disheveled look. I pulled an all-nighter because I was watching The 3 Body Problem on Netflix. Decent show, not really worth losing any sleep over, but sometimes I make poor life decisions. Please like and subscribe if you want regular updates on the game, and I'll see you guys here again next week. Peace.
This notion that we quite like to sail the ocean, so we're building a big boat to leave here for good. We're not keen on sinking, so we're all sitting here thinking, cause we built it too big and we've run out of wood. Idly, we simply can't leave till we get some more wood. Oh, we're not keen on sinking, so